lives are changed after meeting randomly in a hospital room. Now playing only in theaters.
Support comes from WFAE members and Heartwood Tree. Winter trees allow for more careful examination of tree structure. Heartwood Tree Services arborists can recommend long-term goals ahead of the spring thaw. Consultation at heartwoodtree.com. In the forecast, mostly sunny today, but cooler with highs in the mid-40s. Tonight, clear and cold with a low down to 25 degrees. Thursday, mostly sunny with highs in the mid-40s. It's 36 degrees right now in Charlotte.
This is Charlotte Talks. I'm Erik Spanberg in for Mike Collins. For Larry Farber, it all started with an uncle who had a big band orchestra. Or was it his ukulele playing grandfather? Then again, maybe it was the childhood friend here in Charlotte whose Cotswold home included a baby grand piano. From there, young Larry persuaded his parents to buy the Farbers a piano, setting in motion a lifetime of playing keyboards at frat parties, weddings, bar mitzvahs, even a cattle auction. All well and good, but how does a piano keyboard hobby lead to helping this guy find a harmonica?
In my mind, I'm going to Carolina. Can't you see the sunshine? Can't you just feel the moonshine? Leaning just like a friend of mine to keep me from behind. But now I'm going to Carolina in my mind.
Connecting those dots is the heart of Farber's new memoir. It's called Noted Memories, and as you will soon hear, Larry loves the music business as much as he loves playing music and talking about music. Larry Farber, welcome to Charlotte Talks.
It's great to be with you, Erik.
Okay, so you've got this book. You own a jazz club called Middle C Uptown. You have a private member concert club called Music with Friends, but I want to start with James Taylor, who we just heard. When and how did you find yourself hunting harmonicas with him?
One of my favorite stories ever. Ken Thompson, our former CEO at that time of Wachovia, was planning, along with his team, an event during the Wachovia Golf Championship for the private investment bankers, and it was being held at Amos's on South Tryon. So we were lucky enough to get James to do the date, and I was lucky enough to go to the private airport and pick him up. I was waiting there, and private plane comes in from Boston, and there walks off my idol, James Taylor, with a little cool hat on and glasses, gets off, introduced myself, and he said, nice to meet you. He said, I have a problem. So I'm going, oh no. And it was not a big problem. It was just, he said, I left my harmonica back home. He said, is there a music store nearby? I said, of course. And Sam Ash was maybe 2 miles from there. So we get in my car, we go to Sam Ash, and I go, Mr. Taylor, let me go inside and get for you. He said, no. He said, look at me. He said, would you recognize me with my hat and my glasses? I said, probably not. He said, I'll bet you I go in there, I buy a harmonica, and the cashier will have no idea. So I'm sitting in my car, and of course he comes out 5 minutes later with a big grin, and he said, yep, here it is. He said, the guy had no idea. All I wanted to do, Erik, the next day was go back and tell this kid who he just sold a harmonica to. But it was wonderful, and we laughed all the way to Amos's.
You know, that kid grew up to be the bartender who served Mick Jagger and had no idea what was going on a couple months ago.
Same guy, right? At Thirsty Beaver. There you go. Right.
You write in the book that your 70th birthday last year motivated you to put these stories down on paper. And your co-author was Ken Garfield, known by many in town as the Observer's former religion writer. How did the two of you collaborate, and how does the finished product compare with what you envisioned?
So my middle son Harrison's mother-in-law is Lisa Saunders. She's a minister at Christ Episcopal. A year ago yesterday, because my grandson turned 1 yesterday, Sam.
Happy birthday.
Thank you. We were sitting in Phoenix awaiting his arrival from the hospital. And I asked Lisa about the book she wrote and how she did it and how hard it would be. And told her that my dream was to put all these stories of my life in music and and I wanted to do it for my kids. And I didn't want these stories to remain in my head forever. And I didn't want to have to tell you those stories 100 different times. So she encouraged me to do it and told me that Ken had helped her co-author and organize the thoughts. He had experience doing it. So as soon as I got back a year ago, January, I called Ken. We outlined the chapters and we began our pursuit. I had a goal of getting it done by November, and it was, for me, one of the most fulfilling projects I've ever been part of, because now, as I look at my 3 beautiful grandchildren and my children and my friends, I know that I can share these stories, and hopefully those stories will inspire them. But most importantly, 10, 20 years from now, they can say, hey, this is what Pops did. He had a moment with Tony Bennett or Aretha or just anybody. So it's been great, and it's been more fulfilling than I could have ever imagined.
And I think you mentioned at one point in the book that your memory's pretty good, but there may be places where there are gaps or two.
Right.
But tell me a little bit about, did you need to go back? Had you saved much memorabilia, or did you talk to people to try and kind of jog your memory from all these different things that had happened to you, being a part of bands and being a promoter and organizing all these events?
80% was in my memory bank, and I could remember almost all of them, but there were some of those things back when I was playing in bands at 15, 16, bandmates. You remember when we played that catalog? What was some anecdote that you'll never forget? So I did decide to do that. Most of it was stories that were in my head.
I want to ask you about, I want to ask you about a lot of these stories, obviously, but I want to ask you about 2 stories early in your life that I think illustrate your ability to constantly land on your feet and often near someone of note. So the first is when you're a teenager, you're playing in a band called the Rivieras, and you have always loved Motown and R&B. And somehow you wind up with this band, the Rivieras, opening for the Temptations, the Four Tops, the Drifters, Smokey Robinson and the Miracles, I believe at the Grady Cole Center. How does that happen?
So the Grady Cole Center, for all of the Charlotteans like me, I was born and bred here. That was the thing to do when you were a teenager and then into young years at college. But we all grew up, and it was called Park Center right there on Kings Drive, as you know. And one of the most exciting things we could do was, most Friday and Saturday nights, there were these things called dancing shows at Park Center. And Eric, believe it or not, it was about $3 to buy a ticket to go, $5 at the door. And Ted Hall, who was at Hit Attractions and was a booking agent and a promoter, would put on these cool shows. And on any one show, there would be a major headliner, then a sort of a 2-slot band, a 3-slot. And then in the 4-slot, it was a local group, Catalina's, Rivieras, Maurice Williams and the Zodiacs. And we would have the privilege and honor of doing about a 20-minute set before the biggies. And we got the probably the least fun green room. But by the way, we were there. We were with everybody. And the most important thing is when you went back to school the next week, you were the big deal. You had been on stage. So it was great. You got to play with these artists in front of all your friends. So a memorable night or two.
That is the voice of Larry Farber. He is a local music promoter, club owner. He's been in bands for years. He's also the author of a new book called Noted Memories. Now, the other episode that I think foreshadows much of your life occurred in 1972. You're a student at UNC Chapel Hill. Dean Smith has taken the Tar Heels basketball team to the Final Four in Los Angeles, or they have qualified for the Final Four now. You decide to arrange a trip for some of your fellow students to go to LA to see these basketball games. But what you do is you charter a couple of airplanes and you take the profits that you reap from the price and the logistics that you have set up so that it pays for you and your girlfriend and 2 fraternity brothers to go for free. How in the world did you know how to do that at that age?
Well, I give all that credit to my roommate, Mark Rash. Mark was, my big brother, and he always had ideas, none that he personally would execute, but he would always say, Larry, this is a good idea. You should do it. And there's some funny stories about that. But this one, we were sitting in the living room of the TEP house at UNC Chapel Hill. We had just gotten ourselves in position to go out there. And he said, you ought to charter a plane and go out there and take a bunch of the students. And I said, well, Mark, how do you do that? He said, I don't know, but you ought to do it. So quick story, I called the local travel agency and they thought I was nuts, but they connected me with United Airlines in Chicago because they were doing the charters. And they told me that they would fly a plane in from Chicago to Chapel Hill. It would cost us $72 per person round trip. Imagine that, 1972. And they suggested that I upcharge it to 76. I was, you could see the business wheels going,
Yes.
right?
Yes.
$4 markup. And I thought I was really smart. And I figured there would be about, I think there were 70 or 80 people that were allowed to fly on it. So I knew that perhaps with those profits, I could, the people that helped me, we could all go out for free. Well, once I got the first plane, I set up a booth at Chapel Hill in the Union, and within 30 minutes, we sold out. So I called back, we got a second plane, and then all of a sudden, the best part of this, Eric, was all the basketball players. I remember Dennis Weisick and Steve Previs, names you wouldn't remember. They were calling little Larry Farber and going, hey, can I get my girlfriend on the plane? And even the chancellor, it was Chancellor Farabee Taylor, I believe. He called me and said, hey, can I get one of my kids on there? So for like 24 hours, I was a big deal at Chapel Hill. We filled up 2 planes. We went to LA. We got beat by underrated Florida State. I was so depressed. I took my 2 friends and girlfriends. We drove to Las Vegas, and guess what? We heard Jack Benny, came back, and then we played in a consolation game against Louisville and won. So it was a memorable trip in the beginning of my entrepreneurial spirit.
Yeah, I was going to ask you. I mean, it's both amazing and funny. Was that the point when the wheels started to turn and you thought maybe there's a way to take music, entertainment, sports, make that your career? If you weren't going to be on stage, maybe you could do it off stage.
And I think what it did, and being serious, it made me believe. It was an unbelievable life lesson that I didn't understand at the time, that you can do anything. You can put your mind to it. You can make enough calls. And when people say no, you call the next person and you make it happen. And that's me. I mean, I've been up and down, but I don't take no very easily. I persevere, and I always feel like there's a way to make things happen. And so that gave me a lot of confidence. I was only a junior at Chapel Hill. And so I knew that if I worked hard enough, that I could achieve, these goals.
And I have to believe that you were very popular with your fellow students at that point.
I was the big deal for about 24 hours. That was it. Then I came back down to earth. So, but you know what? It was great. That team was like one of Dean's best teams. George Carl and Steve Previs, McAdoo. I can remember it. And we were favored by a lot to beat Florida State. But, so be it. It was a great time.
So I guess you also learned the lesson that it's what have you done for me lately?
That's it. There you go. Exactly.
Well, what Larry has done for us lately is he's written a new memoir. It's called Noted Memories, How a Kid from Charlotte Had a Moment with Tony, Aretha, Bonnie, Sheryl, and More. As I mentioned, his co-author is Ken Garfield, the former Observer writer. We have a ton of stories to get into with Larry's adventures, both in bands and booking bands and opening clubs and all the other things that go with a life in entertainment. So we're going to get to some more of that. Stay with us. The show will go on, but for a moment, we're going to take a quick break. Stay with us here on Charlotte Talks on WFAE.
Support for Charlotte Talks comes from WFAE members and St. Mary's School, an all-girls college preparatory boarding high school in Raleigh, dedicated to challenging girls in grades 9 through 12 to become their best. More at sms.edu/WFAE. On the next Charlotte Talks, last week, new voting rights legislation was blocked by Senate Republicans and by 2 Democrats who refused to change the Senate filibuster rules to pass the bill with a simple majority. This at a time when Congress is paralyzed on almost everything and citizens are losing faith in the system. We hear from 2 experts who talk about the filibuster, voting rights, and the intersection between the two and what it means for the future. That's ahead on Charlotte Talks tomorrow at 9 on 90.7 WFAE and as always on the Charlotte Talks podcast.
On the latest FAQ City, Charlotte's skyline is a hit on Instagram.
Places in the city that only the birds can see from.
These ripples of clouds going across.
I love looking at it and feeling small.
Where can you get panoramic skyline pictures? Listen to the FAQ City podcast at wfae.org/FAQ City or wherever you get podcasts.
We're back on Charlotte Talks. I'm Erik Spanberg, in for Mike Collins.
Y'all hear okay?
My guest today is Larry Farber. He is a longtime music promoter and club owner, and he himself is a longtime musician. And now he's got a memoir called Noted Memories. I mentioned earlier Music with Friends. This is a private member concert club that you started back in 2007. We just heard Sheryl Crow as we were coming back from the break. And I have a really simple question for you. Do you think that you would know Sheryl Crow if she walked up to you on the street?
Well, I didn't know her when she got off the bus. And it was so funny, Erik, because, you know, she came in, they brought in a bus from Nashville, and a lot of people got off, you know, some of her crew and band members. And this really nice lady was walking up to the venue, Spirit Square. And she asked me where, you know, the rehearsal hall was. And I said, it's right around the corner. I said, can I help you? And who are you? And she said, well, I happen to be Sheryl Crow. And I wanted to just melt and run as quickly and as fastly away. But she was lovely. And, you know, she had been traveling, had a hat on, no makeup. And, you know, I didn't recognize her. So, but she was great. She laughed at me.
Well, and that was a memorable night also, because I think that you helped her renew acquaintance with, was it a former cheerleading teammate that had moved to Charlotte?
There were 2 great stories about having Sheryl. She got off, and when we started talking, she said, I have one request. One of my good friends from Missouri was a cheerleader with me, and her dad knew my dad. Cheryl's dad was an attorney, and this woman's dad was also an attorney. They had practiced together. And she said, do you know so-and-so? And I said, I do. She lives around the block from me. And quickly called her. And, you know, of course, invited she and her husband to come to the show. And so we renewed that acquaintance. It was just such a small world. And, you know, and also I had known this woman, and she never mentioned that, you know, Sheryl was a good friend. But the best part of the Sheryl Crow story was Freddie Couples. Freddie had just played the Masters.
The famous
and,
golfer,
Yep. And as you know, the Masters was one of his favorite tournaments. He always did well. And so he had come up to Charlotte to visit his friend Johnny Harris. And Johnny at that time was a partner with me in Music with Friends. So we decided to bring Freddie to the show. And during the cocktail party, Johnny introduced me, and Freddie came up and said, Larry, I'll do anything to be able to meet Sheryl Crow backstage. He said, I'll take you anywhere in the world to play golf. Just take me backstage, introduce me. You know, he was smiling. So of course, you know me, I got a plane to go to LA. I went, this can't be that hard. So I went back to Sheryl and said, Sheryl, do you know Freddie Couples? Do you know much about golf? She said, oh my gosh, one of my favorite golfers. I said, well, he's here. He'd love to do a meet and greet. and he's promised me he'll take me anywhere to play golf. So she smiled. She said, of course, just bring him back. Brought him back. They met, they took pictures, and I don't know what happened, but here's what I know. A year later, I was invited to go to the Masters and was invited by a member. So I was back behind the ropes, and there was Freddie holding court with his buddies. So I went up, I tapped him on the shoulder, and I said, Freddie, you remember me? Sheryl Crow? And he goes, oh my gosh, great to see you. I said, Freddie, I don't know how great it is to see you, but when are we going to go play golf? And he just hugged me and laughed. So it was a memorable night.
I wanted to ask you, you know, as these worlds were expanding for you, you know, for a lot of people, seeing how the sausage is made, the business side of entertainment, in your case, strips away the innocence of the reasons that people fall in love with music or sports or politics or whatever it may be. You clearly made peace with that, but I'm wondering, was there ever a period of disillusionment as you learned the business?
Yes, like anything, you know, there were some times I'd be sitting there and you know, dealing with some customers that weren't my favorites, and you would have and being on the road sometimes, and you know, going to a club in Eastern North Carolina or West, whatever, not to pick on Eastern North Carolina, but a small club, and I would be driving and going, gosh, you know, I went to Chapel Hill. My parents wanted me to be an attorney or a doctor. Here I am driving and to book a, you know, a rock and roll band and make a $50 commission. And I thought, am I doing the right thing? But I did do the right thing because I followed my passion, and that doing those small things enable me to do the great things that I've done and meet the wonderful people. And also the second part of it is sometimes, like anything, relationships with partners, at times, you know, you're not on the same page, and you just have to learn how to compromise and how to deal with personalities, not only of your customers, not only of your bands, but of the people that you work with every day. So those are challenging things that I think are go throughout any kind of business. But I, again, loved what I did every day.
I'm curious how you juggled this. You mentioned, you know, that you are a father of three. Obviously, you start your career. You're married. You have a family. You're working in the entertainment business, booking bands, but you're also still playing in bands. How much of a challenge was that? I mean, I'm assuming it's a labor of love, but still, how did you juggle all that?
Yeah, people would laugh at me and go, Larry, how many jobs do you have? And when I would sit back, and it's probably still, I'm supposed to be retired now, Eric, but I'm not. But I think it's just my nature to be juggling. I was playing in bands on weekends for most of my career. I was involved in charitable things, being part of my faith community, trying to be on boards in Charlotte that dealt with battered women, homeless, you know, whatever people asked, I never was able to say no. And then look, when I got out of college in 1973, in 1974, I opened my first club called the Boardwalk on Monroe Road. And so it always seemed that I had 4 or 5 things going. Never was able to focus on just one thing. And maybe that was not good, but it kept me alive and it kept me thinking. So I still, fast forward now at a young 70, I still have 3 or 4 balls that I'm juggling.
Larry, I mean, that is amazing. I'm sorry to do this to you, but I think one of your creditors may be trying to track you down. We do serve the public here. So let's see, I think we got a caller there. Go ahead, sir. You're on with Larry Farber. Uh-oh. He might be muted, sir.
Well, maybe I paid him.
Maybe you paid the bill.
Yeah, that's right.
Let's see if we can get him. We got to work on his.
Yeah, you got me excited here.
His audio there. It's a rare guest from your past, and we're going to try and get him back. Apparently, you know, this must be a very delicate subject because first his audio is blocked. I think Larry's doing some troubleshooting while we try and get your creditor back. Tell us a little bit about Music with Friends and how that got started.
It was great story. So it's 2006, and my friend Jeff Davis, an attorney, asked me to have lunch on East Boulevard. And there was, I think it was Soleil. It's been a couple of different things. It's Kid Cashew now. So we were sitting outside and he said, Larry, have you ever been to a show at Spirit Square? And I said, of course. It's just a unique venue, probably one of the most unique venues in the country. Beautiful stained glass, an old Baptist church. And he said, wouldn't it be great to promote shows there? And I said, Jeff, it is a great place to hear music. The acoustics are perfect, but I don't want to be a promoter. I said, I've had this idea in my head of having a private club, a music club, where almost like a country club for music lovers. And we would do some shows there. We would have a great cocktail party. People would own their seats like a PSL. We could bring in some of these classic artists. And he said, oh, I love it. I love it. And again, we sat there, we came up with a small business plan. And literally 2 months later, with the help of some great people, even like you, writing a wonderful story in the Journal, which I have on my wall in my office, Eric, thank you. We got, within 2 months, 400 people that believed in this same concept of hearing music, intimate venue with your best friends.
And this was early 2000s?
Our first show was in April of 2007. What's great is we had almost primitive materials because we had no history. It was an idea. So we started calling friends, having parlor meetings, meeting at people's houses in November. And honestly, 2 months later, by January, we had 400 members. And then I called an agency in LA, Beverly Hills, William Morris. And our first artist was none other than the great Michael McDonald. And it was wonderful. I can never forget that first few seconds of seeing again a dream come true.
And that club obviously is still going today, Music with Friends, and you have weathered pandemics and other adventures. And I think right before we were coming on air, you were saying that you've already got your first artist booked for 2022. Is that correct?
We do on April 12th. One of those classic artists that I've always wanted, that the real legends, as I call them, which we're very lucky to have legends. And there's chills that go up and down me when I think about it. But one of the ones that we haven't been able to get routed has been John Fogerty. So John's coming April 12th, and what a great singer, writer. His classics from Creedence are incredible. So really excited about bringing him in this spring as our first show.
That's the voice of Larry Farber. He is the author of a new book called Noted Memories, about his adventures here in Charlotte and across the Carolinas and across the country in some cases as a music promoter, a club owner, and a musician. One of the chapters that you write that's a little more serious is about your longtime close friend, Jay Thomas, who was a DJ here in Charlotte in the 70s. He went on to become an actor. He was on Cheers. He was on Murphy Brown. And he became a mainstay as a guest on the David Letterman show for many, many years before Jay Thomas's death in 2009. I want to play you just a little clip of Jay and David Letterman. Here they are setting up one of his most infamous exploits as a Charlotte radio DJ.
I worked for a small radio station. It was actually big in the area, Big Ways, it was called, WAYS. And we would open to car dealerships. And back then, I was one of the few white guys with an afro. I had the big giant afro. And we would open to car dealership. And so a guy named Pickle Moore, we have a picture, by the way, of Pickle Moore with the Lone Ranger. This picture's never been shown before.
Ah.
That's Pickle, that's the Lone Ranger, and that's the car dealership. That's a used Dodge truck.
There's the Lone Ranger.
The Lone Ranger.
Clearly
right.
a sense of humor.
Right. Right, that's Pickle Moore. His daughter sent that to us, so I want to thank her. I know her name is Sweet Relish. I don't know what her last name is.
So, Larry, I'm curious what you think when you hear that voice.
I get sad. So, sorry. Just a great friend, and he made me laugh. Made a lot of people laugh. It was a great friend. But Jay invited me and my boys to go on the Ed Sullivan stage, and it was so great that, especially for me, to sit there and know I was on the same stage and share that as the Beatles. And so I was there for one of those epic late December shows and was able to just experience with them. But that 10-second snippet just reminds me of all the laughs that we shared and all the memories, and I'll miss them.
Well, someone who shares that sentiment is the long lost creditor, to be silly for just a moment, that we were trying to get on the air earlier. So it is Jay Thomas's former on-air partner. And y'all, of course, go way back. So Larry Sprinkle, what do you think when you think of Larry Farber and Jay Thomas?
Well, first of all, I always call, since we're both Larry, I call that Larry Farber L1 and I'm L2. But our friendship goes back so many years, probably, I don't know, 50 years or so, that we all became friends. Jay, obviously, and he and I worked together on the radio from 1972 until he left in 1976. Larry and I have known each other the whole time. We all became great, close personal friends, and the kind of friendship that, you know, you always wish you could have, and you have it, and you're very thankful for it.
Well, and Larry Sprinkle, Larry Farber writes in the book actually about how rare it is to have lasting friendships once, you know, a working relationship is over. And as you say, all of you remained close through obviously the rest of Jay's life, and you and Larry still obviously in the same city. Did you have any idea that these relationships would be this long running when y'all all met all those many years ago?
Gosh, for me, with Jay especially, because, you know, in the very beginning, I was a new guy at the radio station, and Jay was a very intimidating guy. I mean, you know, he was a big, powerful presence, big personality, and, you know, we became very close friends, but it took a while for me to really develop the true friendship, because it was a business and, you know, on air, great relationship on air, but it developed into just a sincere friendship. And then obviously Larry Farber, all part of that, kind of like the Three Stooges or the Three Musketeers.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. You know, Eric, there's nothing that cures anything more than laughter. And Larry, L2, L1, and J1, when we got together, no matter where it was, over lunch, we just told stories. We made each other laugh. And Larry will tell you that the best part of Jay was that these friendships that were cemented years ago became his relationships for a life. And when Jay left Big Waves Radio to go to New York, his only regret was that Larry didn't go with him, because he still, honestly, till his last breath, thought that Larry Sprinkle was the most creative, funniest guy that he ever worked with, and I know that he meant that.
Yeah, and I was very overwhelmed by that, very flattered by it. It was, you know, for someone as talented as Jay Thomas to make that statement. And yeah, Jay left and went to New York City. I decided to stay back home with L1 around, and we both watched this amazing career develop with Jay Thomas. You know, from working very successful radio career in New York City, auditioning for Mork and Mindy, getting the part, and then heading to LA, and he never left.
Well, unfortunately, we have to leave for a break. I want to thank Larry Sprinkle from WCNC so much for coming on and being with us and sharing a few memories. We're glad you were able to get through. And as for you, Larry Farber, now, Larry, are you L1 or L2?
He's L1. Larry Farber.
L1 sticking with us. Stick with us, L1. We're
Buddy,
going to be back.
you.
We're going to be back with more on Charlotte Talks on WFAE. Thank you.
Take care. See you.
Support for Charlotte Talks comes from WFAE members and Atrium Health, dedicated to promoting better lives through better health with comprehensive care focused on overall wellness. Atrium Health. Ahead at 10 o'clock on 1A, the SATs are going virtual. and they're getting a lot shorter. The College Board announced on Tuesday the standardized test will drop from 3 hours down to 2 and will be completely digital by spring 2024. Students will still need to take the test in a designated testing center. The move comes as calls grow for the U.S. to rethink standardized testing and its place of prominence in the academic landscape. What's next for standardized testing? And are the days of teaching to the test numbered? That's ahead at 10 o'clock on 1A. And stay with us. More conversation on Charlotte Talks just ahead.
Latinos in Charlotte-Mecklenburg schools account for about 27% of the student body. For many of those students, navigating the system is problematic.
Because they don't have anyone to interpret or translate, so they didn't understand what was going on in class, and they would get frustrated and drop out.
Join us as we examine these issues and more in our 3-part series, Breaking Barriers, Challenges and Opportunities for Latino Students, starting February 1st on 90.7 WFAE and WFAE.org.
We're back on Charlotte Talks. I'm Erik Spanberg, in for Mike Collins.
And
That's the voice, of course, of Whitney Houston. And my guest today, Larry Farber, was unexpectedly touched by her death in February 2012. This involves music with friends again. And in this case, Larry, you were trying to navigate a delicate situation with Aretha Franklin. What happened? Oh, I'm not sure. We're having maybe some audio trouble. Can you hear me all right, Larry? Okay, got it.
Yeah. Yes, I can hear you. So I'm sorry, I missed the question.
Yeah, Larry, as we were coming back, we were hearing some of Whitney Houston, and I was just saying that in 2012, she died in February of 2012, and you had set up a concert with Aretha Franklin. She was in Charlotte getting ready to perform when Whitney Houston died, and of course, she was Whitney's godmother. What happened next?
So we always do a sound check the morning of the event. She got in, she was staying at the Ritz. And that night about 10 o'clock, I got a call from her manager and said, Larry, I have some bad news. Whitney Houston passed away, and talked about being the godmother. Aretha was a godmother, and she wasn't gonna be able to perform the next day. She was distraught, as I would know she would be. And I'm sitting there with my wife and, going, how sad it was. So I said, can we at least talk tomorrow, see how she feels? He said, absolutely. And I was trying to, think about maybe what would be appropriate. And again, it was a challenge to try to save the situation, but I didn't want her to perform under those circumstances. But I was able to ask her road manager to bring her over to McGlowan Theater, which, as we all know, was an old Baptist church. And with her roots, with her dad being a minister, I knew that this wonderful venue that had been transformed in church, had been transformed into venue, might be just the perfect place for her to grieve through music. And so we went there we met at 10 o'clock. Aretha came in and she just sat quietly and looked around at the stained glass windows and just was totally isolated by herself. And 20 minutes later, she called her manager over. She spoke to him. He came over to me and she said, she would like to perform tonight under one condition. And I said, what's that? As long as she can do a tribute to Whitney Houston. And I'm thinking, are you kidding me? I mean, how lucky are all of our members to be able to be part of that? And we were. And Erik, by the way, from that 10 o'clock in the morning until the show at 7, I was contacted by honestly every ABC, NBC, CBS, because they knew the story, and they all sent down camera crews to watch that segment when she sat down at the grand piano and just improvised and sang "I Love You, Whitney," and just on and on. And it was so moving, so touching. there wasn't a dry on the theater. And if nothing else happened memorable in the since 2007, that was something that I will remember forever, as will everybody that was there.
Yeah, that's an incredible story. In the book, you also mention another interesting thing that happened that night, which is before she decided she would perform, she was going to do the tribute, but she also wanted to have at least I think it was $50,000 of her fee paid in cash. So before the show, you're backstage helping her count money, and then what does she do with the money?
So, we were told that she wanted 50,000 in cash. Went to several banks, or actually you loaned it to me. And so I just came over to your house and said, Eric, no, right. So no, anyway, we got the money, and I went behind pipe and drape with my friend Chris McClure that helps me with the shows. And we had 50 stacks, each of $1,000. There were two her bodyguards outside, two guys that played at LSU, by the way. And so we walked in, I counted the money, and her manager said to me quickly, don't be insulted if you count the money and she asks you to count it again. It's just been part of her history, which I now understand even more. We got through counting it. We were having a conversation about Whitney, and she was so kind to me. And we got through, and I sort of preemptively said, Miss Franklin, may I count it again? She said, no, that's all good. So I felt great. Felt like we had bonded in that 2 minutes. She took all 50 grand. She threw it in her big black pocketbook. She picked it up, and I went out. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome the great Queen of Soul, Aretha Franklin. Normally the artists just walk out. She walked out with her pocketbook. She put it on the piano. It was not more than 5 feet away from her, and that's where it stayed.
But you explain in the book, I mean, there's really a painful backstory to this of why artists like Aretha Franklin began to they wanted people to show them the money, literally. And the reason was why?
Well, and that's why I so much respected that and honored it, because we don't know what path people came from. And, even the latest movie helped me understand it more. The movie that Jennifer Hudson just had out. And what's so crazy, Eric, is when I was watching the movie, I went, that's really what happened. And you could tell, but she had played her early career in Detroit for a lot of club owners there and around that were always shorting her $100 or $200. And that lived with her. And even though her fee was, exponentially much, much more, it just stayed with her. It was about trust. And so it made me, again, one of those moments was I felt like for that 2 minutes that she trusted me. And so none of that bothered me. I really understand it.
And you had this experience before with the Godfather of Soul with James Brown, correct?
Oh my gosh, that was so incredible. Cindy Patterson, who a lot of us know, had hired me to book James Brown for First Union in Virginia. It was a Sunday, and we had him perform, and his balance that day, after us sending in a deposit, was $25,000. But the contract stated, in this case, certified check. Knocked on the door to pay him an hour before the show. Eric, he opens the door with the curlers in the hair, again, just like you see in the movies, but it was happening. And I'd never met James Brown, and there was James Brown at the door. And you for a second, you're taken back. Mr. Brown, here's your certified check. He said, what? He said, I want cash. I said, well, Mr. Brown, it's Sunday. You're supposed to perform in an hour. That's going to be nearly impossible. He said, here's the check back. Figure it out. So I go to Cindy and a bunch of the bankers that had accompanied us on the flight. Guys, we've got a problem. They huddled like a bunch of coaches do during a timeout. They came back to me and they said, we've got an idea. And they didn't tell me what it was. 30 minutes later, they come back with about 10 paper bags filled with $20 bills. They had gone to all the ATMs in Roanoke, Virginia, emptied them out. They had filled the bag with $25,000 worth of 20s. 5 minutes before the show, I knock on the door. He comes to the door and said, Mr. Brown, there's 25 grand here. You do not have time to count it. trust me, it's here. I'm going to hold this bag and give it to your manager when you walk on stage. And he did it. But it was another one of those scary moments.
That is the that is the voice of Larry Farber. He is the author of Noted Memories. He is also the founder of Music with Friends, and he is the co-founder and owner of Middle C Jazz Club in Uptown. Larry, before I want to ask you a little bit about opening the Jazz Club, because that's kind of your most recent venture, but with the Aretha Franklin and James Brown stories in particular, I mean, it's both painful and kind of funny, but I'm wondering, when you have that kind of cash on you, do you call security? How nerve-wracking is it to have that kind of money on you?
Well, and of course, the latter, I didn't expect that I have to go gather 25,000. We knew with Aretha what to do. So we had went and got the money, had it in a safety deposit box, and actually had an officer there, and we gave him the money to keep. They put it in a vault that night just to keep it. But yes, it makes you nervous. It makes you nervous because you don't want to be responsible for it. So thank goodness now we can Venmo, we can PayPal, we can Zelle, we can do all those things. I don't think anybody even knows what cash is anymore.
That's a good point.
Bitcoin, I don't know. So I don't have to worry, right?
That's a good point. So as I mentioned, you had so much free time that you decided to start a jazz club uptown, and you opened not too long before a pandemic, just to sort of up the stakes, make it a little more challenging for yourself. Tell us a little bit about why Middle C Jazz Club and how you've navigated through this pandemic.
Thanks for talking about that, because it's such a, I can't even tell you, it's just the most wonderful spot for me. My son, Adam, my oldest son, Adam, knew that his dad, one of his dad's last, I say this was probably not bucket list dreams, was to give Charlotte a jazz club and a club that hopefully, Eric, will be there for a long time. That will be a platform for these great local musicians, national, to come and display their great talents, because I've always believed that the world of jazz musicians were underappreciated and underpaid. So I'd always wanted to do this, but I knew I didn't have the time when I was working for East Coast Entertainment as an agent. So I retired in December of 2019, and at the same time, November of 2019, we opened Middle C Jazz. It wasn't best timing because, of course, of COVID, but Adam and I worked for years to find the right location, which we did, 300 South Brevard, which is across from the NASCAR Hall of Fame, Convention and Visitors Bureau, right off the light rail. And we began a pursuit. And now, 2+ years later, I am so proud, and I mean this, to be now recognized as one of the premier jazz clubs in the country. And I say jazz, but it's really the umbrella of jazz is everything from R&B and soul, and whether it's New Orleans, you like that jazz from your hometown,
nice,
to modern jazz, to smooth jazz. We really have a venue that displays all of it. So it's been great. I hope that it will be something that people in Charlotte will love forever. And when people come to Charlotte, will be a place that they know is one of the spots that they must go to hear great music.
Well, speaking of great music, I have to at least mention much of your musical bookings and playing has involved weddings, and you have some great stories in here. And I want to ask you about one in which you witnessed someone dying on the dance floor. What happens at a wedding when someone dies on the dance floor?
We were in Blacksburg, Virginia. You don't ever forget these things. And it was a snowy night, and we were literally, it was our second or third song, and we're playing, and all of a sudden we saw somebody just collapse. We, of course, from where I was playing behind the piano, thought it was just somebody that fell, and obviously was not. People huddled around. Of course, we stopped playing, and this gentleman, literally died on the spot. And it was just one of the most awful, frightening kind of experiences and you felt helpless. There was a doctor as a guest and he tried to save him. Unfortunately, the guy had a massive heart attack. And, we, of course, took down our instruments and just went back to our hotel room and just, we were all upset. We were all shaken by it. You pretty much experience everything when you out there playing weddings, but certainly that was not what we expected.
That's what I was going to get to, is going through all of these events that you have managed. I mean, it really is just life comes at you and it comes at you really fast. We only have a little bit of time, but I do want to mention another special event. I don't think you played this one, but I think you booked this one, which was a debutante party at Myers Park Country Club, maybe 15, 20 years ago. And the entertainment was the Dave Matthews Band?
Correct. Yeah, so I can't remember exactly which year, but it's been, at least 20 plus years. And believe it or not, this band from Charlottesville, Virginia was playing and we at East Coast booked it. And it was a very reasonable price, honestly, probably less than $2,000 at that point. Dave Matthews was just making waves and noise and I was getting ready to enter that field of original music. And so we had him booked, and this was literally, Eric, one of the last sort of regional debutante balls he was doing before he went on the road as an opening act. And the woman who was working at Myers Park Country Club got his rider, and it demanded a private dressing room, certain kind of food. And I'll never forget the woman calling me and going, "Who does this guy think he is? We're not going to do this." And I said, "Well, I think you need to talk to the mother of the debutante daughter because he's getting ready to be the next big thing. I think we need to go ahead and accommodate him." And of course they did, but it was a funny story because she said, "Who does he think he is?" Well, we know who he became.
We do know that. And we know that Larry Farber has been delightful talking about his new book, No to Memories. Thanks for joining us today on Charlotte Talks, Larry.
My pleasure, Eric. Thank you so very much.
Charlotte Talks with Mike Collins is a production of 90.7 WFAE. Support for Charlotte Talks comes from Mazda of South Charlotte. Our executive producer is Wendy Herkey. The senior producer is Aaron Keever. Our producer is Jesse Steinmetz. And our engineer is Joby Sprinkle. For more information about Charlotte Talks, go to